This video is for week 14, Recommendations for Novice Researchers. In this module, you'll be giving recommendations to researchers about to undertake their first action research project. The best way to conceive of this process is to ask yourself, what do you know now that you wish you had known at the beginning of this study? What real-world challenges did you encounter along the way? And what strategies did you develop to overcome those challenges? You may also write about theoretical difficulties you experienced and the concepts that you learned to help you overcome those difficulties. Write your recommendations as pertaining to a specific step in the action research process. Write recommendations that you have for the literature review or for the framing of the research question, as well as data collection and data analysis processes. You also will write some recommendations for the presentation of findings, although we recognize that you haven't totally completed that yet. Here are some practical recommendations that appear again and again throughout the literature. For example, when conducting a literature review, it's important to first conduct some preliminary research in order to find the jargon relating to the specific concept that you're studying. This will help you narrow your search through repositories of scholarly articles. When you're framing your research question, it's important to frame it in a way that keeps in mind the limitations of the study that you're about to conduct. You most likely will not have unlimited funding, and you most likely will not have very many researchers. Tailor your research question to the resources that you have on hand. There are several recommendations I have for the data collection process because that's the step that most researchers have the most difficulty with. For example, it's important to always bring a backup recording device to an interview. The literature is full of examples of people having to redo interviews because their recording devices failed. You don't want that to be you. When doing observations, it's important to keep extensive field notes. This is because some exchanges might not seem important at first glance, but in light of artifacts that you find or interviews that you conduct, they might take on a new significance. So you really don't want to leave anything out unless you absolutely have to. Also regarding data collection, you are going to want to practice your interview with a fellow researcher or friend. This will allow you to think on the fly when unexpected events occur during the literature. Keep in mind, you don't want to totally structure the interview. You're framing it, and you're allowing the interviewee take you where they need to go. Also be ready to reframe your research question throughout the data collection process. You may have framed it in a manner that the data that you're collecting is not going to support. You don't just throw out the data and start totally from scratch. Adjust your research question to the data that you're collecting. If these concepts are popping again and again through the data collection method, they're important, and you can tailor your study to fit that. Also, as far as data analysis, refine your thematic codes several times throughout the data analysis process. Your initial conception of the data is most likely not going to be correct. So be flexible and follow the data where it's pulling you. Follow the codes as they appear during your analysis rather than your initial framing of those codes. So you can also write some theoretical advice, as the above are kind of practical recommendations. It's important to follow a theoretical school of thought when conducting your action research project. You need a model to base your study on, and so at the beginning of the study, choose a model and follow it as closely as possible. if you make any changes to that model, do so for a theoretical reason that might, be related to your specific field, but don't just change it because it's convenient to you. Um, do so because you really need to for whatever reason. Um, Also, just plan as much as possible. You have a framework with the school of thought that you're following. Now, try and outline each step of the way as you're doing it. You know, don't think on your feet. Plan it in advance. A little more down to earth is to make sure to do member checks with your interviewees. This is also relating to data analysis. You may interpret an interview in a way that is not intended by the interviewee. You want to check in with them to make sure that you're not interpreting it in an incorrect manner. Um, Also related to that is to do check-ins with your fellow researchers. Have your fellow researchers analyze your data that you've collected and vice versa. Uh, this will make sure that your findings are transferable. Another thing that you can write down in this step of the way is the challenges that you encountered that you maybe don't have a solution for. What did you find most difficult that you think other researchers should keep in mind? Like maybe the transcription of audio recordings took way more time than you expected. Um, that's something to note down. There's no real solution to doing it, but you think people should know that before they conduct their own research project. Uh, I hope this was helpful for you to write your own recommendations for novice researchers. You can contact me with questions any step along the way. Thanks.